Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. Good afternoon, everyone. Before we get started, I just want to cover a couple of housekeeping matters. First, the webinar is being recorded, so don't worry if you miss something. We'll make the recording available to attendees afterward. And second, because of the number of people who are on the call, we have all microphones muted, but if you have a question, use the chat box on the left-hand side of your screen to send a question either to everyone or to the presenters, and we'll address all of those at the end of the presentation. So thank you again for joining us for Engaging Diasporas to Invest, a webinar that's hosted by IDEA, the International Diaspora Engagement Alliance, and David Beatty of ProSeeder and Golden Seeds. I'm Sarah Youssefnajad Gallagher, the Program Officer for IDEA. In case you're new to IDEA, I'll give you just a bit of background before we get started. It's a public-private partnership between the U.S. Department of State, USAID, and Calvert Foundation, which is the managing partner. IDEA harnesses the power and energy and resources of diaspora individuals and groups in order to contribute back to their countries of heritage. We do this through a few different channels like investment and entrepreneurship, philanthropy, volunteerism, and innovation. And one of our roles is to serve as a network that connects diasporas to each other and to opportunities to engage back home. One of the biggest requests we get from diaspora groups is for information and advice on how to invest in their countries of heritage. Our members are interested in making social and economic impact that goes beyond remittances, and that's why we're very excited to host this webinar with ProSeeder. David will walk us through some background on affinity group investing and diaspora investing and share more specifically about angel investing. We also have two stellar guests on the line who will tell us about their experiences with angel investing groups. We have Sarah Gamay from Cairo Angels in London and Fairgul Kennedy of the Irish Diaspora Angels in New York City. And with that, I'll turn it over to David. David, welcome.
Great. Thank you very much, Sarah. And a very good afternoon to everybody. I'm here in New York, and in the background, you can actually see Bloomingdale's on 59th and Lexington. I'm at the offices of Golden Seeds, and I'm delighted to be able to share the passion which I have for engaging diaspora. So first of all, a bit about myself. I'm David Beatty. I'm an angel investor, an entrepreneur. I actually grew up in Ireland, moved to London for 5 years, and have now been in the United States for 25 years. Over the last 25 years, I started my first company in 1993, which was Empire Messaging, and that actually company still runs today. And I exited that company 11 years ago when I hired somebody to run the company. So I actually still own it, but I consider that a successful exit, that I was able to actually get out and still own a company that is running today. I've since then co-founded a number of different companies, and you can see the logos of some of the companies I'm happy to talk about. There are other logos that I'm not happy to talk about because, after all, I'm an entrepreneur and sometimes things don't go the way we want them to. But my history as to why I'm talking to you today is really because of what I've done with Golden Seeds over the last 8 years. In that at Golden Seeds, I've been responsible for what we do internationally. And that has allowed me to travel with organizations like the State Department, Mercy Corps, USAID, and Financial Services Volunteer Corps overseas to work with angel groups and entrepreneurs in leading workshops on best practices for angel investing. So just to set the expectation about what we're going to do today is I'm going to speak for another while, and then Sarah and Fairgul are actually going to share their real stories about setting up a Diaspora Angel Group. But I'd like to just give some background and some of the background that I hold as to why I believe the diaspora for any particular country are an ideal community to engage with, and some ways as to how we've gone about doing it. So some background as to what I hold is, let me get the slide correct, sorry, is with regards to the effects of the diaspora engagement. So when I take a look at talking about diaspora, my understanding is there's basically three different levels. And as a country matures, if people actually engage with the diaspora, first is remittances, the second is charity, and the third is business. And the reason I believe that it's important to engage from a business perspective, from an investment perspective, is with remittances, you're talking about survival. With business, you're really talking about helping people to become self-sufficient and providing economic development. And of course, this does depend on each country. Depending on what you're doing. As I've traveled around the world, so Golden Seeds is now, we've spent over 300 man days between all our members around the world globally, generally leading workshops and on delegations with organizations like the State Department and the Aspen Institute. As I've traveled around the world and I talk to entrepreneurs, whether they're in the United States or anywhere, the three things which I find that entrepreneurs always need, no matter where you are, is they need access to a network, they need access to knowledge, and they need access to capital. And wherever I've been, entrepreneurs generally ask me to invest in their company because they think they need money. But I assert that actually what they need an awful lot more than cash is actually access to my network, because I live in the United States and I know people who can help them get into the US market, but also to give them a different perspective on business in the United States, and also access to knowledge, particularly about their industry. It's very easy living in the United States to think that the whole world has the same type of culture of entrepreneurship that we have in the United States. We're very lucky in the US because we've multi-generations of people with deep networks and deep knowledge. That's not the case in many, many countries around the world, particularly developing countries. And it's people like me. I grew up in Ireland. I care about Ireland. It's where I'm from. It's just part of my culture. And it's people like me who have this desire to support our home countries and want to make the world a better place, and live in the United States or in Western countries with tremendous experience that can actually provide tremendous expertise and help to entrepreneurs in these developing, in our home countries. The next slide I want to just touch on, because it's quite topical, is crowdfunding. And I want to just make sure that we distinguish the different types of crowdfunding as a way to invest effectively in a country, because whether or not you're giving or you're doing rewards, you are investing in a company. But for me, I put this slide together to demonstrate really that the different sizes from an individual perspective, the sizes in dollars from an individual perspective, that when you're doing crowdfunding, that are involved. But the biggest change that's happened in using technology or crowdfunding is that with regards to equity and debt, is that the amounts of money that an individual can actually invest is now gone down considerably lower. 10 years ago, you had to be investing $25,000, and if you're overseas, generally an awful lot more. In a particular company. Now it's possible to invest $100 or to, either through a lending platform or equity, $1,000 or $5,000 in a company. And that's one of the biggest changes that's actually happened in the last few years, is the ability for people to invest an awful lot smaller amounts of money. So I just wanted to touch on that and throw that out there. I also wanted to talk about engagement of individuals, because On the left-hand side, you'll see the dollars. On the bottom, it's actually, when I go back earlier and talk about networks and knowledge, when you're investing money and owning a company, my experience has said that people engage with the company an awful lot more. And so one of the reasons I think it's very important for people to actually invest in companies is because as an individual, they're going to engage an awful lot more in the companies, and they're going to open up their networks and knowledge to the entrepreneurs no matter where they are in the world, an awful lot more than if they just give money or do remittances or do debt. So let's talk very briefly about angel investors, because that's what I am. And first of all, define my definition of an angel investor. It's an individual who invests their own money into an early stage company where they do not know the founders. And I've underlined the part that says where they do not know the founders for the very simple reason is because that's effectively, otherwise you're talking about friends and family. And the big difference in there is when you're working with friends and family, they're generally going to be an awful lot more forgiving with regards to the terms of what they invest in because they're investing in you to support you. When you're talking about people who don't know you, they're very much going by, from an investor perspective, what's really important is a return on your investment. Because the reason investor is in the title of angel investor is because every angel investor is looking for a return on their investment. This is, it's beautiful capitalism, as one of my friends says. And we're talking about it's for profit. But when we define angel, I went online to the dictionary and to see definitions of angel, and the one that I liked the best was guiding influence. Because angels are patient. They have to be. They have to be supportive. They have to be trusting. And every angel investor that I have met in the last 8 years, whether it's at Golden Seeds or anybody I've met at the annual Angel Capital Association meetings, none of them need to be doing what they're doing. The kind of angel investors, the kind of people who I come across who I see as successful and good angel investors are all successful people, and they all have some type of mission as to why they're actually involved with angel investing, whether it's a matter of passion for business, whether it's a matter of their identity in their own community, whether it's they can't play that much golf and they need to actually do something to keep themselves stimulated, or if they have a particular social mission. Every angel investor I've ever met wants to get a return on their investment, but they also have some other story as to why they want to be involved in working with early stage companies. And I think that's really important when we're talking about Diaspora, because, and I'll get to it in a minute, what we talk about is affinity investing, which is really impact investing as well. Who are angel investors? They're 5% to 5% to 5%. And this is just purely on numbers, because if you're talking about less than 5% of the US population are what we call in the United States accredited investors. And for very simply, most angel investors in the United States are accredited investors because it keeps paperwork, legal costs down. And an accredited investor is a self-declaration that you have at least $1 million of worth or over $200,000 or $300,000 individually or married annual income for the last 2 years. So it's a self-declaration by the Securities and Exchange Commission to ensure that, the theory is that if you have enough money, you're intelligent enough not to do stupid things. I'm not sure that's actually correct in the world, but that's the law. So you've got about 8 million accredited investors in the United States. Of less than 5% of them, about 300,000 make angel investments every year, and less than 5% of them are members of Angel Capital Association angel groups. So when you're talking about angel investors, you're really talking about 1 in 1,000, and I believe it's the exact same when you're dealing with the diaspora community. So I want to set your expectations about when you're trying to engage with angel investors. you need to realize that you're looking for the diamonds in the rough and trying to find a way to put those people together, to get them in a room together, to work together, because together angels can make a huge difference. But set the expectation that, as one colleague at the Angel Capital Association said to me, a rich guy does not equal angel investor. So just because somebody has the money does not mean that they're actually necessarily likely to be a good candidate to be an angel investor. And it's hard and tough to find the people who actually want to get them. So set your expectations. It's 1 in 1,000 of the population, but they make a huge difference. So one of my other topics I like to talk about is angels versus VCs. And this is really because of the media. So many entrepreneurs think that money comes from VCs. When the reality is, if you look at this in the 2013 numbers, angels did 70,000 deals and VCs did, invested in 3,382 companies, 5% of what the angels did. Yet VCs invest an average of 7 million, angels 350,000. But one of the other big things, which is very important when you're dealing with angels versus VCs are professionals. They're dealing with other people's money. They have fiduciary responsibility for other people's money. Whereas when you're dealing with angels, you're dealing with people who are able to make decisions about their own money, which enables them to really align themselves an awful lot more with entrepreneurs. So again, this is one of the other things I just wanted to throw out there and set expectations on. I spoke about affinity angel groups. There's plenty and plenty of them out there. And I believe it's because people who are members of these particular types of angel groups, because they want to support their community. And what I find is they don't want to, they don't want to support it by charity. They actually want to support it because there's a fundamental belief from many people that supporting business can drive social change and actually enable people to really make a difference. And also it makes sense to invest in your community purely from an investment perspective because you know more about it and therefore can reduce your risk. So I think there's some great examples of different types of affinity angel groups in here. Whether or not you're talking about the Israeli syndicate on AngelList, you're talking about Cairo Angels, the Irish Diaspora Angels, the Flying Kiwis, or the Angel Investment Network of the Caribbean. They're all great examples of people who want to support their home countries, diaspora angel groups. And the people I speak to there all speak about their desire to help people in their home countries from a business perspective. You've got great examples of affinity groups of universities, whether it's Georgetown Alumni Angels or HBS and a number of other universities in the United States have affinity groups. If you think about it, people want to work together. They want to actually have a lot of fun doing it. The vet biz, that is a community of United States military veterans who have been successful in business, who want to support other people, other military veterans. Angels is an angel investment group for the gay and lesbian community who want to support people in their own community. So it's a very powerful way because you're actually getting at people's hearts about purpose, not just making money. It's enabling angels to actually make, to really be where their hearts are, what their purpose is, which really drives an awful lot of interest. And it's not just interest from the investors. Some things I have noticed in talking to people who run these groups is entrepreneurs also want to be associated with these groups because it's part of their community as well. And so you get very good deal flow. So this is an example of some of the affinity groups that are out there. So talk quickly about why a group as opposed to an individual. There's an awful lot of data from the Angel Capital Association and other angel investment organizations globally. Why I believe a group and why I like to belong to a group from an investor perspective is it reduces my risk because I've got more people looking at deals. I've got more access to a stronger network for due diligence. I get better access to different deals. My group has a much larger reputation than I do as an individual. I get to diversify my portfolio, because one of the fundamentals in angel investing, like in any investment class, is you want to diversify. You spread the workload, but one of the biggest reasons I'm a part of many groups is because it's more fun. I get to meet really interesting people who are generally curious about the world and wanting to work in next generation companies with a different generation. And I've been doing this pretty much full time for the last 8 years, and we have just great fun doing it, and that makes it not so much work. Very quickly, different types of models, business models, as to what type of groups that you can do. I'd be happy to talk to anybody, take questions on this, or to talk offline with people if you'd like. But there's different business models as to how to run a group. You can either do it by deal. So each member decides how to invest. So, entrepreneurs would present, and then individuals say, yes, I want to know more, and then make a decision. And that's very much like herding cats or driving a herd. You've got a pledge syndicate where members actually pledge to invest a minimum. So you'd have 20 people who'd all say, yes, I will invest at least $10,000 in any deal the group votes up or down on. You've got a fund syndicate, which is like a pledge syndicate, except you all invest money in a fund, and then the fund invests as one. You've got funds, which are very different, because you're actually letting other people manage your money as opposed to being involved in the decision. And you've got one of the new things that have happened in the last 2 years, which are online syndicates. AngelList is the most well-known one of these, and they're single deal venture capital. In other words, you are generally paying somebody a carry, but you're making a decision to invest in one deal. And if you don't know about online syndicates from AngelList, I would recommend you do it. One of the things that ProSeeder, a shameless plug about ProSeeder, ProSeeder is an online platform for running angel groups, for running the business of angel groups, venture capital firms, private equity firms. It's designed for any group that wants to manage the process of investing in and managing investments in private firms. We run most of the angel groups now in the United States and many around the world, and a number of family offices and private equity firms and broker-dealers. But one of the big differences about AngelList is a very public platform. So it's very much Silicon Valley concept of everybody wanting to know what everybody else is doing. What ProSeeder is a private platform. So if you don't want to be public about what you're investing in, you could, that's a different type of platform. There's lots of platforms out there, particularly in the so-called crowdfunding space. So those are some of the different models that I've seen about how angel groups work. Very quickly about resources. ProSeeder is an organization. We're more than happy to make introductions and help you. We have a platform that's designed specifically to help people run their business. Recommend the Angel Capital Association website. There's plenty of resources there. There's the European Angel Association. Many national organizations have angel associations with plenty of resources. And my 2 books, not necessarily about angel investing particularly, but talking about communities. Startup Nation, which is a story about Israel, is just a great book to read to understand how Israel has become arguably one of the, it's definitely one of the top 5 countries or communities from a startup perspective. But then also Startup Communities by Brad Felt is a must for anybody who is interested in creating an entrepreneurial ecosystem, in my mind. And I'm going to just finish. If anybody's on this call is interested in actually creating an angel group specifically to invest in, get Diaspora to invest in their home countries. The big question is really how to start. And I think we're going to hear from Fairgul and Sarah about this in a minute. But from my perspective, any angel group that I have seen anywhere in the world that has started, it has always started because one person has decided that they are actually going to make a difference and they're going to create an angel group, whether it's for their local community geographically, whether it's for their any other type of community that they're affiliated with. It always takes one person who decides it's going to make it work. And so with that, I'll pass it back to Sarah, who can introduce our next speaker.
Thank you very much for that, David. I think that background on the opportunities and different options diasporas have when they're thinking about engaging back home through investment was really useful. And now we're going to hear from two speakers who can give us a little more information, as you said, about how people would go about starting one of these networks if they're interested. And first, we have Sarah Game from Cairo Angels in London. Sarah, are you there? Fantastic. So I think we need to unmute you. Just one sec.
Okay.
Great.
Hello.
Please go ahead. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah, for organizing, and David and everyone for inviting me to speak. So as David said, it really does start with one person. And in Cairo, that person was Hossein Alem. And around the time of the events in Egypt in 2011, one of the good things that came out of the revolt or revolution or whatever you want to call it these days was there was this a growth in the entrepreneurial scene in Egypt, and the whole ecosystem was really growing. You had the emergence of like accelerators and new startups and whatnot, and so Hassem decided it was a good time for him and a few friends to start Egypt's first formal network of business angels to invest in these early stage companies. And that has really grown tremendously. And the network is now 80 members in 6 cities globally, mostly based in Cairo. The network has invested $1.8 million in 15 startups across a variety of industries. And it's really become kind of a regional leader. We've been looked on to kind of help with founding MENA Angel Investment Networks, and we're looking at hosting an Africa Angels Investor Summit. So it's looked at as kind of a model for affinity investing, and we're looking to link up with other organizations in the region to see if we can strengthen our pipeline and kind of and grow the entrepreneurial scene in the whole region. So 3 years into Cairo Angels, where Cairo Angels was really running really well, had a solid pipeline and had a solid network base, we decided that there were actually so many Egyptians living outside of Egypt that would love to get in on this, both from an investment perspective and to be linked in with what's happening at home. Hello? Yeah, there we are. So both to be both from an investment perspective and to be linked in with what's happening in Egypt. And so we decided, let's try to form this chapter of Cairo Angels in London. And the way we basically did it is we meet. What we do is we meet quarterly at London Business School. We have one of our members is a professor at London Business School, and we actually watch the pitch events in Cairo live via Google Hangout. So we get together and we watch what's happening in Cairo live. These pitch events in Cairo happen once a quarter, so we get together here once a quarter, and we have all the slides in advance, everything in advance, and we can kind of watch the pitch event and have our ask our questions to the entrepreneurs, and we can also engage with each other in London and talk about which investments we like and all of that. And it's actually been quite successful. We've got 12 active members, mostly first-time angel investors. 6 have already invested in at least one company. And this is, we just started this at the end of last year in London. 2 people have led due diligence from London. And that's great because it shows that you can actually be engaged with the process. It's not just an investment, but if someone wants to lead the due diligence on one of the startups, they can do that from London. They don't need to be in Cairo to do it. And so 2 have already done that. And 2 of our London-based investors have brought in actual pipeline deals to Cairo. So, I mean, we're pretty happy with how we've been able to set that up in London. And we hope that it continues to grow. So I guess, everyone says, like, how did you do that? How did you get people that are in London, Egyptians that are in London, to invest in Cairo and kind of be part of that network? So this is basically the experience we've had on how we did it and how to kind of what worked for us. So I think, first of all, that you need to have a strong local network first. You can't just say, okay, like, we're going to start a network in Zimbabwe for people to invest into Zimbabwe, but there's no local network there that's really established with pipeline and credible angels. You need a very strong network at home first. And we were already 3 years in when we formed the London network, and we had, there were already several investment. There were at least 10 investments already made. The roster of angels that we have are pretty well-known people within the Egyptian community. And the pipeline of deals that we had was interesting. So that all has to be in place before you think about, before you can consider kind of engaging Diaspora, I think. And then what you need, I think, to set it up is someone who's going to do the work. So a champion, what we're kind of calling a champion. So in the case of Cairo Angels, that was kind of me in London. I'm Egyptian, but I've been living in London for 5 years. And I have, a network in Cairo and in London. I love the concept of angel investing. I love business, entrepreneurship, angel investing, and I'm very keen on affinity investing, as David's. I love the word affinity investing, and actually I picked that up from David, and I've been using it a lot because I think it's really representative of what people, yes, they're interested in entrepreneurship and startups in the tech scene, but I think there's an element of loving it even more when it has something to do with a community that you're really a part of and engaged in. And there's an element of kind of helping the economy or the startup scene or the entrepreneurs themselves grow and develop that is really important for affinity investing. And so you need that champion that's going to basically call up their network and say, hey guys, listen, meet me. We started at someone's house, actually. Meet me at so-and-so's house on June 5th. We're going to watch these startups pitch. we're going to talk about why angel investing is so important, why it's so important to do this, and just mobilize people. And that's how we started here. We just called people up. We had a pitch event coming up, and we organized kind of an afternoon at someone's house where we talked about angel investing. We had one of the angel investors from Cairo Angels to speak about their experience. So it went off really well. And then we watched the startups pitch, and that was just the first one. And then it kind of just, it didn't, once people saw what it was, it didn't take much convincing. And we were really able to get more and more people every time we had a pitch event, and really grow that into something. So you need a champion, but you also need your anchor angel investors. So we're lucky in London. The Egyptians in London are kind of back and forth between London and Cairo. There's a lot of links between London and Cairo, and the Egyptians here and in London. And so some of the angel investors that had invested when they were in Cairo were actually living in London at the time that we formed this network. So that was great because we had a few people that had been involved in Cairo, and then were able to come here and tell us their experience as investors, as part of the network. And these people are respected people who are our friends and part of the community here. So people could really say, okay, like, this sounds like something serious. So that's really important. And then this should be number 3. We're utilizing technology. We're using Google Hangout to stream the pitch event live from Cairo. But we're finding that people also want to make it personal. So we could tell everyone, okay, you just stream online at home, get on your Google Hangout, and you can just watch in Cairo on your own. But what we found is that people actually want to be with people, right? They want to be in the room with other like-minded people, talking about the startups, sharing their expertise. And so there should be that element of getting together. And so the way we've done that here is after that initial time of meeting at someone's house, we were actually lucky. And one of the people that wanted to get involved was a professor here at the London Business School. And so he said, why don't we use one of the LBS rooms for our next event. And so that's what we've done. We basically get together and we watch the pitch event, but we're together here as a chapter. And we watch one of the challenges we've had is how to make it interactive with Cairo. And we've kind of opted to be on the safe side for now. We're basically, when we watch the pitch event on Google Hangout, we just watch. And at the end, when an entrepreneur pitches and there's a Q&A, I actually send questions on WhatsApp to the admin there in Cairo. And that's how we do the Q&A. We just kind of send her questions on WhatsApp. And she then asks the questions in the room. And in the end, so we haven't really yet gone about making it interactive, but that if you can make it more interactive between Cairo and London or wherever you are, I think that's really great. But we just haven't worked out a way yet to make it interactive without interrupting the flow for the startup pitch event. And then the last thing that I would say is that you try to ensure that the link between the Diaspora and the home network is strong. So, for example, Hossam and some of the founders of Cairo Angels come to London frequently. We organize a drinks event, or we organize something so that people here know who is in Cairo. We invite all the people in the London network to anything that's going on in Cairo, because people frequently are back and forth. So if something's going on in Cairo, they can join in there. So we try to make sure that, yes, you're part of the London group, but you're also part of the Cairo group, and it's all part of one thing. And so people here feel like they're really a part of what's going on back home. And same way, we've encouraged everyone here to really be a part of what they're doing. And as David mentioned, I mean, people invest money, but they also want to invest time. They actually interested. They actually want to get involved in due diligence on companies. So it's not a passive thing, being an angel investor. And so we've really tried to encourage our members in London to get involved in the nitty-gritty. So leading the due diligence, getting involved with sourcing deals and pipeline, just anything that people want to be involved in on the Cairo Angels level or on the startup level, we really encourage. So that's our experience with Cairo Angels in London. We hope to replicate our model in other places.
Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. And I think it was really useful for the audience to dig in a little bit about what you have to think about and the steps you have to take when you're actually considering establishing a network like this. So thank you very much. And I'm just going to pass over to Fairgul Kennedy of the Irish Diaspora Angels in New York City and hear a little bit about his experience in starting an angel group. Fairgul, welcome. Fairgul, can you unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon? Perfect.
Literally a month.
Fairgul, I'm sorry to stop you. Would you mind starting over? We had a different icon unmuted, so I've just unmuted your phone line. Sorry about that.
No problem. I'm on my webcam again as well. So my name is Fairgul Kennedy. I'm the co-organizer of the Irish Diaspora Angels. We are a relatively recently created group. We had our first meeting about a month ago, and we are on the cusp of making our first investment, which we're set to close in about a week and a half. Just to give you a little bit of background on myself, like David, I'm originally from Ireland, actually just up the road from David. David always likes to share the story that I was involved in a school run with his mum in the back of his car way back in the day. 20 years in the States. I mainly worked in technology firms. Now I run my own recruiting firm. I also sort of run a group called the New York Digital Irish, which I'm going to talk about in a second, which is where the idea of the Irish Diaspora Angel Group came from. I've always been a connector by nature, but I'm actually approaching this, we approached the creating the angel group, at least from my perspective, not from someone who'd previously done an angel investment. In fact, next week will be the first time I'm actually going to write a check as an angel investor. I'm approaching it from the perspective of deal flow and representing the companies that are interested in angel investments. So I'll explain how that sort of happens. I've always been involved in the Irish communities over here. I always found it a little frustrating that because I was in the technology space, in particular in the startup space, a lot of the groups that exist out there for Irish networking consisted of a lot of bankers, a lot of lawyers, a lot of professional services people, but very few people in the startup space. So I decided to create a group that was explicitly designed to sort of expose those people in the Irish community in New York City, and at the same time sort of celebrate and try and help Irish startups who are looking to break into the US. And this is ultimately the origin of the Irish Diaspora Angel group. So the group in question that I set up was about 2.5 years ago. It's called the New York Digital Irish. We host events every 2 months. We're now up to about close to 1,000 members. We've had 70 Irish startups pitch at events that we host every 2 months or so. One of them's actually going on tonight. Over the course of the past 2.5 years. And what we get the firms to do is give a pitch and then come up with their asks. Generally, they're interested in customer connections, partner connections, employees to connect with, but literally universally, they all ask for funding. So either introductions to institutional VCs or to angel investors. And David, who's a regular attendee of these events, and I got to talking. And after introducing a few of these firms to David and equivalent angel investors and other institutional VCs, we started thinking there had to be a better way. We were reinventing the wheel literally every time. And because of that, we decided to set up the Irish Diaspora Angel Group. When we started thinking about the group, we started thinking very big. We started thinking about putting an umbrella structure in place, potentially staffing with 2 or 3 people, raising about $1 million, potentially from the Irish government to staff an organization. But ultimately that led to a fair amount of procrastination on our part. So we decided to go with the startup approach of more like a minimum viable product. And that's where the Irish Diaspora Angel Group sort of came out of. So we definitely moved from big to small. We were able to, beyond David and myself, we were able to convince a very visible Irish entrepreneur with a very successful track record to join us, who's also a significant angel investor in Irish startups. And he gave us a fair bit of credibility. So getting a key advisor on board was key for us. Luckily for us, we already had the Digital Irish Group in terms of providing a flow of companies. So we had seen 70 firms present. We had a nice pipeline of firms. We were able to filter those firms that were presenting to the ones that we were looking for people. We decided to focus on firms that were already in the process of raising a round. And what we wanted to do while the group was in its infancy and when we didn't have the ability to do due diligence ourselves was to piggyback on, in particular, other institutional investors that had already done due diligence. So that's what we decided. Our criteria was must be doing an existing round in and around the $800 to $1 million region where they're looking to round out that round. And our goal was to piggyback on other people's due diligence. So out of the 70 firms or so that have presented at the Digital Irish event, we were able to filter it down, look for the firms that were in those categories that were actively looking. We came up with a short list and got the firms that way. The people was a little trickier, so we obviously had a good setup on the firms. Personally, I knew a fair few Irish Americans, Irish expats, that were high net worth. Luckily in New York, there's a couple of event-centric publications and businesses that make a business out of naming the top 50 Irish and Irish Americans in certain areas like Wall Street and technology. So we were able to sort of mine those lists and work our connections. We ultimately reached out to about 60 people We got 45 people who were interested long term, which is a pretty high ratio. But the list was targeted to begin with. And on the night, on May 18th, when we set it up, we had 24 people involved, 4 of whom were sort of dialing in remotely. I think an important thing, we did an important element that sort of gave us a bit of legitimacy, not only beyond having the advisor, but the platform we got. We used ProSeeder. It was ready to go, and it certainly gave us a presence that I think was quite surprising to a lot of people who were just kicking off an event, and here they saw a very professional platform that where we had a little splash page, a landing page that allowed users to see what we were all about before they got into it. But that certainly gave us an element of legitimacy. And we also set it up. We had the event in the offices of one of the big 6 accounting firms, which certainly helped from a credibility perspective as well. So just to sort of tell you a little bit about the format and give you a little bit of the details on the stats. We invited 3 firms to present. We explained the potential investment options. I think David described it as the buy deal approach. That's effectively what we did. Was we said we're going to do this by deal. There was 2 ways it was going to happen. If we had critical mass of people in a room, and critical mass meant an investment total of at least $100,000, we were going to create a special purpose vehicle, a special entity called an LLC over here that would invest in the Irish entity. That was one option that we gave people, and if there wasn't critical mass, they could just directly invest and negotiate with the entrepreneur. In the end, we actually ended up going a different route, which goes to show you probably shouldn't be too prescriptive on exactly how this goes down, but it was important to sort of explain the options to people. I think it was also important, we gave them a guidance on the investment level we were looking for, and it was a minimum of 10K per individual. And if we were to do an LLC, obviously we needed to get to 100K to make it worthwhile to set up an entity around it. If the investor was interested in negotiating directly with the entrepreneur, it was generally the entrepreneurs that decided what the minimum level was. And in our case, it was pretty consistently at 25K. But 10K was a good guidance. I think it's also important to get that across early as well, because some of the less well-off potential angel investors are quite conscious about what the threshold is, and although they want to get involved, they want to make sure they're not out of their depth. So out of that event, we had there was 3 firms that presented, and 1 firm, there was a significant show of hands. We completed due diligence on that. We had 2 follow-up due diligence sessions, and then we've been chasing people to get it done, but ultimately we got over the $100,000 mark, which was our intention with the first event. And we're likely to close that in the next week and a half. In terms of sort of lessons learned, the expression "herding cats" has been used already by David, but there's definitely an element of that. So don't underestimate the effort that's involved. We already had the pipeline ready to go on the firm side, but it was getting the people in the room and getting them organized. They were all interested and engaged for exactly the affinity reasons that David suggested, but still, it's hard to organize and get people going. Even at the end, when people had committed to invest, just to actually to bring it home was hard. I mentioned start small. I think that's important. We really did bootstrap this. This was very much a minimum viable product, and I think that's the most effective way to go about doing things. We sort of acted like a startup ourselves and tested the idea. That's at least how we articulated to the audience. In terms of sort of better ways to structure things, we did this by deal, but what was interesting of the makeup of the people in the room, it was probably about, of the 24 or so, it was probably about 50-50 Wall Street versus other people, professional services, previous entrepreneurs, other members of angel groups. For the Wall Street folks, compliance is a big issue for them. So, some of them actually proactively came to us at the end and said, we'd love to just give a lump sum and, have a sort of pledge syndicate approach. And that's something that we've taken on board, and I think we may end up implementing. I personally am in favor of sort of like a 2-stream system where you have a pledge syndicate approach and a buy deal approach, so you can sort of embrace maybe the younger members who are less well off, and then get them to ultimately grow into the sort of the pledge syndicate arena. We're obviously very early stages, so I don't want to, this is by no means prescriptive. We're still figuring this out. I mentioned how early we are, but I think that it's important to note that we definitely got the sense that it's going to get a lot easier. By doing this investment, we'll get a bit of credibility, but the people in the room were incredibly engaged, and they really talked about getting friends involved, getting others involved. So I think, from now on, it's definitely going to be a much less steep road to climb to move forward with this. And we've decided to pursue this every 3 to 4 months, and that's our intention. Okay. So that's it for me. Any questions before
Fairgul, thank you so much for sharing your experience and a pretty different experience than Sarah. So I think it's really valuable for the audience to hear all those perspectives. I can tell from the number of questions that we've received that people are really interested and want to dig in a bit more. So because of the amount of time we have left, I'm going to ask the questions and see if perhaps we can have one speaker address each one. And if we have time at the end, we can go back for additional comments. So I'm just going to unmute the speakers so that we can ask the questions. Sarah, yours is the only mic I can't seem to unmute, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself. Perfect. So the first question is actually for Sarah. A question about how do you choose potential members in the angel group, and what's the purpose of the local networks? Is it about identifying potential deals and relationships? What's your opinion on that?
Well, the local network, so in our case, that would be the network. It sounds like, Cairo Network is basically the heart of the network. They source deals. There is a full-time administrator, which handles all of the admin behind putting together the pitch events. Most of the companies that we look at are pitched from Cairo. They're mostly Egyptian companies, although now we're starting to look at some companies outside of Cairo, but still in the region. But everything is kind of in Egypt. And so that's why we need a local presence there that is sourcing deals, dealing with the admin, dealing with everything. And the London network kind of plugs into that local network. The second question was about how do we choose our angels?
Potential members, yeah.
It's all through friends and friends of friends. And mostly what we've had in London, even in Cairo, a lot of our network is actually young professionals. It's not actually high net worth individuals. It's pretty much professionals from like 30 to 45 who have a bit of extra cash and are interested in supporting entrepreneurs, have their own businesses in some cases. So that seems to be the same type of profile that is the London angel. Most of the angels are bankers, lawyers, business people, again, just in their 30s or 40s. And it all self-selects. So at first we cast the net really wide because, it's not like we have a huge, we're not in Egypt here. Like the network is smaller. So we actually cast the net wide where I kind of threw it out there for everyone I kind of know that is a professional that is in London. And then I keep the invitation open and I find that it self-selects. So our members are supposed to pay dues and eventually it filters down to the ones that are serious. And there's no need to kind of kick anyone out. Like it all self-selects, basically, is my experience.
Thank you. And maybe a follow-up to that. Someone asked if the speakers think it matters if the angel group is 100% diaspora or more heterogeneous. And I think you've answered that in your comment about casting a very wide net.
Yeah, but actually it's a wide net, but it's all Egyptians. We haven't reached out beyond our group. I don't know if that's what the question is about, but it is because of all the restrictions, investment restrictions, and the challenges with investing in Egyptian companies. You need to be very comfortable with that risk, and so it's tough to pitch that to non-Egyptians. So that's why we've stuck to kind of casting it to an Egyptian audience.
I think it's the other way to look at that is the most likely people who are going to want to be involved are of that community. but we don't restrict it to that community. And I get a lot of questions about the Irish diaspora when they say, oh, I'm an Irish American, or I like Ireland, can I be involved? So I think it's, you're making it up as you go along. The most likely people who are going to want to be involved are from the affinity group that you're targeting, but don't restrict it, because diversity is a wonderful thing.
Thank you. And so since we've just brought up getting comfortable investing in other countries and being familiar with the risks and financial regulations, we have a couple of questions related to that. One is, how do you navigate and understand the financial implications of investing in other currencies and in other countries? And also, how do you get comfortable with local laws for international investors? And can you provide any more information on how you conduct the more qualitative and subjective parts of the due diligence? So that's a number of things that you guys can respond to. Maybe pick and choose.
I'd like to just jump in on that, because both the Cairo Angels and the Irish Diaspora Angels are both co-investing with local angel groups. If you actually listen carefully, the real lead on the deals is actually an investment company in each country. So for the Irish Diaspora Angels, the company that we're investing in, there is a lead investor in Ireland who's done the due diligence, and the entrepreneur we know is well known to investors in Ireland. And I speculate for the Cairo, there's a local lead. When you're investing in an Egyptian company, the Cairo Angels are the lead investor in Cairo, which means that as somebody who is diaspora, at the end of the day, you're able to rely on somebody that you trust in Cairo. And as the Irish Diaspora Angels, one of the big pitches we have to the entrepreneurs and investors in Ireland is that we in New York and America are value add investors. And our value add is our network and our knowledge about the American market for enabling and helping those Irish companies get into the US market, which is what all the entrepreneurs who are in technology or want to get access to the US market, they all are desperate for networks and knowledge that can help them. So the legal part of it, it's all going to depend on whatever country you're in. But the fundamentally, why I believe it's important to work with a local investment partner is because you can then trust somebody who is aligned with your interests as an investor. Because two things I know always happen whenever I make an investment. The first thing is that whatever the entrepreneur says is going to happen doesn't happen. And the second thing is something is going to go wrong. And why do I say those two things? Because every investment I have ever seen or ever heard of always has those two things happen. So when something goes wrong, you as an investor in New York or in the United States or London, you want to know that there's somebody that you trust locally who's able to sit down with your business partner, the entrepreneur, the person you've invested in, sit down with them and help them get through the problems. And so the legal aspect of it, I actually think is going to be independent of each country, but having people that you trust on your, who are on the same side of the fence as you are as investors locally, I think is really important.
Thank you, David. And maybe a follow-up and related to that, a couple of folks have asked, maybe Fairgul, you can answer this question about what due diligence actually entails, a little more detail about the different elements of that.
Sure. Well, I was clear that, we were, because we were so young, right, and we're just getting the group together, that we didn't think we could do our own significant due diligence yet. That will probably come down the road, right? But we did narrow down on one company out of the three. The due diligence there consisted of a follow-up meeting with the CEO, was a rehash on a lot of the financials. It was a lot of detailed questions on competitors, their readiness in the States. I mean, to David's point, right? Obviously the States is very real to all the members of the group, and they want to see that the firm is here, is engaging, in the U.S. market where they can help, right? And also obviously have opinions on how to go about doing that. that's largely the due diligence that took place. What was interesting though as well was that there was a couple of very seasoned investors, and I'll say this is slightly tongue-in-cheek, but I'll say probably the most regular due diligence question was Mr. A or Mr. B investing in the deal? That's ultimately what it boiled down to for a lot of people, which was slightly surprising to me. We saw definitely a sheep effect, right? That where people wanted to be comfortable with the fact that others in the group were doing the deal.
Thank you. And this question is a little bit different. So the question is, what role, if any, do diasporas have in attracting foreign direct investment and trade from their home countries to revitalize America's post-industrial cities? And this question came from Detroit, so it doesn't necessarily have to correspond to that, but Detroit, as we know, is an example of this kind of iconic American place.
It's not something I'm aware of. I wouldn't feel qualified to speak on that.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Washington, D.C. Are there any other examples of angel group formation in emerging markets, not just Europe and the U.S., that you guys could touch on briefly?
Sorry, could you repeat the question again, please?
Sure. They want to know a bit more about angel group formation for emerging markets, not just European and U.S.
So angel groups are starting all over the world. There's a number of initiatives that the USAID are doing, and a number of different NGOs and supporting angel groups starting. There's the Caribbean Angel Group that's supported by the World Bank. There's a group that started in Ghana. There's groups throughout everywhere in the world. There seems to be groups starting either as traditional angel group models, but also online type of models in things. There's a group in London as well, the African one, I think. I can't remember the name. So there's a whole load of them, and there's a whole load of support. One of the things I've been doing with Golden Seeds is, we've been to 10 countries now where we've actually led workshops. Golden Seeds has its own education curriculum. We firmly believe that an educated angel investor is a better angel investor, and I think that now that Golden Seeds is consistently one of the 5 largest angel groups in the United States, it speaks to that. So our members travel around the world and lead workshops on angel investing best practices, very often in conjunction with local embassies, U.S. embassies, or the State Department. So Golden Seeds has also provided, has a program called Golden Seeds in a Box, which provides all the best practices and mentorship to emerging angel groups. And I've done that in Southern Asia. There's plenty of examples of angel groups starting. But at the end of the day, it takes one person to decide that they're going to make it happen. And in the case of the Irish Diaspora Angels, that was Fairgul. I helped him tremendously, but he was the person who said, I'm going to make this happen, and went out and made it happen, and found that there was a huge need or a huge demand and interest from some quite powerful people in the Irish diaspora community here in New York who wanted to be part of it.
Thank you very much. Fairgul, go ahead.
Yeah, I could just add to that. I mean, I think, I set up the Digital Irish group about 2.5 years ago, but before that I had another group that was all about helping foreign startups break into the US. And it was sort of like a rainbow representation of lots of different countries, in particular Europe, right? But I think it's important that, the reason why I didn't do the Irish one to begin with is because I didn't feel that there was a critical mass of startups coming out of Ireland. There are certainly going to be countries maybe represented on this call where there isn't necessarily a critical mass of startups or a significant diaspora. I mean, David already sort of applied that with implied that with Caribbean level organizations or African level organizations. And my advice would be just when you don't think that there's critical mass, there is there is an affinity amongst expats in the States, right? So we're sort of all in this together, right? So even though I'm part of the Irish Affinity group, I'm also just generally interested in European firms and international firms. So there are ways in which you can collect together with other countries from a similar geography and take advantage of expat diaspora networks from multiple countries. So don't discount the potential to do that, because there may not be the critical mass to get things going with your particular country if there's not the flow of startups or a significant diaspora in America.
Thank you, Fairgul. And I'm going to pause the questions there. I think we answered almost all of them. I want to thank the speakers very much, David, Fairgul, and Sarah, for taking the time to talk with us today, tell us about their experiences forming angel networks in different areas around the world. I know that this was really beneficial for our members, and I think the questions could have kept going for a couple of hours. So thank you all very much. And we'll be sending out the slides and the recording probably tomorrow, so you guys can follow up if you have any questions or you missed something during the presentation. So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks again.